John the Mouse.
In the early 1860s, the Steamboat Bertrand plied the waters of the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. This boat, a 160-foot by 30-foot sternwheeler, reportedly hit a snag on the Missouri River north of Omaha and sank in April 1865. It has been claimed that the most valuable cargo to go down with the boat was some 35,000 pounds of mercury. This mercury was to be used in mining operations in Montana or the Dakotas. Considerable quantities of whiskey and gold may have also gone down with the boat. The total current value of the boat's cargo has been roughly estimated to be about $250,000. At least as early as the 1890s, treasure hunters have attempted to locate the Bertrand. Apparently the boat has now been found. In 1968, through the use of metal detectors, Corbino and Jesse Pursell of Omaha located a boat inside the DeSoto National Wildlife Refuge, some 28 feet below the surface of the land along a former channel of the Missouri River. The boat site is located just inside Nebraska near the Iowa-Nebraska border. Thus far, only the front section of the deck has been uncovered. The original superstructure above the deck was evidently swept away when the boat sank. Excavation stopped during the winter of 1968-69 and will be resumed in the spring of 1969. Among the many artifacts already found with the boat is a soapbox marked Stores Bertrand. This find strongly suggests that the boat is indeed the Bertrand. Whether its reported cargo of mercury, gold, and whiskey is intact remains to be determined. Beginning in the early 19th century, an increasing amount of steamboat traffic passed along Nebraska's segment of the Missouri River. This traffic reached its zenith in 1859 during the Colorado Gold Rush and declined in the 1860s due to Civil War disorders and to competition by the railroads. The Bertrand, owned by the Montana and Idaho steamship lines, was one of the largest steamboats to ply the Missouri River north of the Platte River. The apparent discovery of this sunken boat and its contents is a major historical find. This steamboat is Nebraska's only substantial link of a tangible nature with the early steamboating era. This discovery may be unique. No other early steamboats are known to have been discovered and excavated along the Missouri River outside of Nebraska. According to terms of the Corbino and Pursell contract with the federal government, the U.S. Department of the Interior will retain possession of the Bertrand and most of its contents. If restored or preserved near its present site, the Bertrand should become a significant additional tourist attraction to the wildlife and recreational area in which it is located.
"40 years ago, the cargo from the wreck of the Steamboat Bertrand was recovered from the mud of the Missouri River, which first had claimed her in 1865. In 2011, the river tried to take it back. Initially, the plan was to stay put. Huge efforts went into reinforcing and constructing dikes and levees to keep the river at bay. But the predicted height of the flooding was increasing, and the electric power to the visitor center could not be guaranteed. So at noon on Friday, June 10th, 2011, the decision was made: move the collection. But when? Where do you begin? What do you do first when your museum collection contains 250,000 objects? Some are which as delicate as glass, and some are sturdy as, well, steel. Well, first you prioritize which objects are more rare and which ought to go right away. Then you gather as many packing materials and rental trucks as you can get your hands on, and send out a call for volunteers. You post a list of tasks, show the workers how to pack artifacts, assign them to workstations and the storage area, and tell them they only have a few days to get these objects to safety. The first thing to go were the boots. They were already in boxes and just needed padding to be ready to go. As thousands of boots went out, experts like the MWAC Karen Roberts packed delicate objects. Wooden packing crates also went out early as they were rare and fit nicely into modern movers' boxes. We drew most of our help from local students, firefighters, teachers, state of Iowa law enforcement officers, and refuge personnel sent from around the region. Ceramics such as these ale bottles from Holland are intensely strong, but they still needed individual padding and careful packaging. The loading dock was the center of our activity. Rental trucks lined up awaiting their load, even as more packing supplies were being delivered. On a few occasions, heavy lifting equipment could be used to move bulky things like steel cabinets, but mostly we relied on strong backs and willing hands. The Fish and Wildlife Region Director, Tom Mellis, came by to check on our efforts and was put to work packing cannonballs. Sometimes packing objects resulted in light-hearted moments. Most of the objects were individually wrapped in tissue or foam before carefully packed in a cardboard box. Before any boxes left the museum, they were marked with the location from which they were taken. Space for odd-shaped objects could pose a challenge to our eager packagers. At times, boxes had to be custom-made. James and Michael showed a remarkable talent for using every square inch of cargo space in the rented trucks. Our first temporary storage spot was provided by the good people of Omaha. There was a large meeting room that was not being used, and before we knew it, the available space at the Ford Center was filling up, but we had still lots of stuff to move. By Tuesday, June 14th, 20% of the collection had been packed and removed. A fresh influx of volunteers helped us to pick up the pace even further. Long hours and hard work were paying off, but would there be enough time? Our next challenge involved finding a second site to store our boxes. In desperation, we even wound up taking one of the truckloads to Lincoln, where the NPS allowed us to use their limited space. But when the manager of the warehouse in Omaha area learned of our predicament and graciously offered the use of his facility without charge. The offer of a controlled storage space came at the right time. The packing effort at the DeSoto was gaining momentum, and without missing a beat, the work continued and the trucks began to roll to their new destination. With thousands of square feet of storage secured, the truckloads of artifacts began to fill the warehouse. No real effort was made to organize a collection at this point, as time was the most important factor. Necessity is really the mother of all invention. Since the cabinets were too heavy to move, the drawers were removed and cocooned with a technique now forever known as Meister's wrapping. One team would hold a padded drawer while a second team would maneuver around them to stretch wrap plastic over and under the entire drawer. The final product was both protected and transportable. Thanks, James. Moving iron engine parts could sometimes be nerve-wracking. Metal textile drawers required some careful stacking. 100-year-old raincoats demanded the very special packing. As Friday, June 17th approached, the end was in sight. Hundreds of shelves and cabinets once loaded with precious artifacts from the Steamboat Bertrand were standing empty. The big push was on to get all the objects out of the storage bays. Odd-shaped tools such as shovels had to be packed into handmade boxes before being transported to safety. Finally, at noon of Saturday, June 18th, 2011, the last load of the objects and museum supplies was packed into the last truck. 7 days of hard work had achieved the impossible. The Bertrand collection was safely out of harm's way, and the workers had good reason to smile. When the last truck pulled out and the last volunteer went home, an eerie silence settled over the storage bays. The shelves and cabinets were empty. The fury of activity that had descended so quickly on the museum had ebbed after just 1 week. However, the Missouri River could not be held back forever. In the end, it was forced its way through the levees. On June 24th, 2011, water poured into DeSoto and causing millions of dollars in damage. The flooding of the refuge reached record heights. For several weeks, the visitor center became an island, accessible only by boat. Water did not enter the upper floors, but the boiler room was submerged, and electrical power was lost for several months. Since then, the lake has returned to its pre-flood level, but it's uncertain when the collection will be returned to DeSoto. An aerial view of the visitor center complex before the flood event. Same view, summer 2011. A great deal of damage was suffered. There was tons of sand and silt were deposited. At DeSoto, roads were washed out and hiking trails destroyed. The refuges suffered damage to the fishing piers and buildings. After looking into various options, the decision was made to lease the space in the temporary warehouse, set up security environmental controls, and house the collection where until the time came to return to the visitor center at DeSoto. The objects had been stored at the Ford Center, and the NPS were all brought to the warehouse so they could be housed together. To our relief, an inspection by an independent contractor revealed that the artifacts were not damaged during the evacuation. In the meantime, the collection is being sorted, inventoried, cataloged, photographed, and repackaged in anticipation of the day it will be brought back and put on display.
This video is on the Atchison family that was riding on the Bertrand when it sunk. Let's start out with a little background history before the accident. John Atchison was born in Galena, Illinois on December 13, 1835. His wife Mary was born in the District of Columbia in 1839. They had 2 children born in Winona, Minnesota. Charles was in 1860, followed closely by his sister Emma in 1861. John Atchison moved to Virginia City, Montana in May of 1864. In September, he was appointed notary public at Virginia City by Governor Edgerton. He was partnered with Joseph Millard, president of Omaha National Bank, and B.F. Allen of Des Moines to establish a gold exchange near Alder Gulch. Mary, aged 24 with her 5- and 4-year-old, got on the steamboat that was bound for Fort Benton, Montana territory to reunite with her husband. The Steamboat Bertrand sank on April 1, 1865, after hitting a snag in the river north of Omaha, Nebraska. All of their baggage was lost in the sinking of the Steamboat Bertrand. They only had 1, maybe 2 boxes of belongings. We do know what was left behind: pony cart. Perhaps the most well-known of the Atchisons' possessions was this child's toy, a tin trotting pony with a 2-wheeled tin cart attached to it. Sadly, only 1 wheel was located. The pony came from 2 pieces of tin and was painted a dark gray color with red-orange spots on the horse's back and nose. The cart was only 1 piece of tin with folded edges and painted a red-orange color. It was a well-used toy indicated by the dents and scratches found on the exterior of it. First stole. This stole was a soft, brownish-black color, perhaps mink, in a shoulder style with a rounded oblong shape. Silk lines the cloth where the stole would touch the shoulders. No silk is located on the central section. Knitted wool cap. This wool cap was made out of reddish brown and black colored yarn and was semicircular in shape with a stripped socket pattern of knitting. The cap had been stretched, indicated it was well worn. This style of hat was meant to be tied on the head with 2 hanging tassels, but only 1 tassel remains. Drake's Plantation bitters. One of the rather unique items found on the Bertrand would have to be the amber-colored, cabin-shaped bottles known as Drake's Plantation bitters. They first appeared during the American Civil War and contain 17% alcohol. It is a St. Croix rum. 12 of these bottles were found in the Atchison belongings. School building blocks. Another of the children's toys was the 30 lightweight blocks, one side being gray and the other side a pale red. Both sides of the blocks had black building patterns painted on them along with the word Hills painted over 3 small windows. The gray side, though, contained the words Village School underneath Hills, while the red side said Union College under it. Shortly after the sinking of the steamboat, the gold exchange near Alder Gulch got sold. Joseph Millard and B.F. Allen then established a bank in Helena, MT named Allen and Millard Bank. John ended up running the bank for them. In 1866 the bank turned into the First National Bank of Helena, Montana. In 1870 federal census in Montana Territory shows that Mary was a housewife, John was a banker, Charles was 10 and Emma was 9. They had $25,000 in personal property and a 25-year-old domestic servant from Prussia, Barbara Newman, who was possibly a passenger on the Bertrand. Unknown. After Mary passed away, John moved to Mentone, California to live with Charles around 1884/1885. He lived there for about 13 years before dying at the age of 97.
Passengers of the Steamboat Bertrand, Fanny and Annie Campbell. This video is on the Annie and Fanny Atchison that was riding on the Bertrand when it sunk. Let's start out with a little background history before the accident. Annie Campbell was born Galena, Illinois, March 18, 1844, and 2 years after. Fanny Campbell was born Galena, Illinois, November 4, 1846. Sometime after that they moved to Chicago and lived there until 1855 when Major James Campbell moved his family from Chicago to St. Louis. The girls were put into a Catholic boarding school. In 1862 part of the family left for the Montana Territory. Fanny and Annie were left to finish school. After the girls finished school in 1865, they headed to Montana to meet up with their parents and other siblings. The Steamboat Bertrand was bound for Fort Benton, Montana Territory, carrying cargo and passengers. Many of those passengers were headed up the Missouri River to start a new chapter in their lives. The Campbell girls were traveling to reunite with their parents who established a general store in the territory 3 years earlier. Annie was 20 years old and her sister Fanny was 18 years when they got on the Steamboat Bertrand. Let's start going over what they left behind. Perhaps the best known Campbell family artifact is Fanny's slate. It is a simple school chalkboard made of thin plate steel and is covered on both sides with a black lacquer. Carved lightly in the top of the wood frame is the name Fanny. The coat is a highly decorated example for the 1800s, indicating the Campbell family had above average means. It is a black silk overcoat with a semi-fitted bodice and a widely flaring skirt. 2 gilt brass hat pins, perhaps one for each sister. These hat pins, one being round and the other more oval-shaped, were one of the finer things found on the Steamboat Bertrand. This tiny glass heart is a yellowish-green transparent heart with beveled edges and a frosted appearance. Look closely at the heart, it is also engraved with yours/truly on it, indicating it was most likely given by a loved one. This delicate glove is a black silk crocheted mitt with diamond-shaped mesh featuring 4 designs. This style mitt was commonly worn to semi-formal events. A year after Fanny arrived in Gallatin City, her father had her piano shipped up the Missouri River to Fort Benton. A Steck and Son of New York. The land transportation was done by Diamond R Transportation Co. Fanny became a school teacher in 1867. She remained single for most of her life but married former teacher and rancher Eliezer Thornburg, born July 28, 1843, on October 30, 1910. Annie married Frank Dunbar, a Tobacco Root Mountain cattleman, on February 27, 1867. Born April 24, 1837, they had 5 children together: Florence, Mary, Herbert, Frank, and Homer. 1869 Fanny Campbell was certified to teach a common school. In January 1872 a free school opened under her supervision, the Gallatin Avant Courier, for March 11, 1872. How about their siblings? Gordon Campbell became a successful trader and mercantile businessman in Gallatin, Montana. Helen Campbell married Montana State Senator Judge James Gallagher. After Major James Blackstone Campbell passed away, Chicago Tribune said Major Campbell offered some land for sale in England calculated at $20 million in the past. Their mom Sarah Kane Campbell tried to claim dower rights of 10 acres and 400 lots in Chicago, but she didn't have any luck getting it. Montana became the 41st state on November 8, 1889. Annie Campbell passed away 1912. Fanny Campbell passed away June 24, 1919.
There's only one river that goes traveling sideways, interferes with politics, rearranges geography, and devils real estate. That river is the Missouri. Back in '65, we called it the Big Money, when we were feeling for life. The trouble with going up the Missouri River in a boat was that you had to take the boat along. I was a captain then. I came out of retirement to take over this brand new steamer, the Bertrand. Why risk your neck on the Missouri when there are much safer rivers to travel? Money, my friend. Big money. Those miners up in Montana were desperate for supplies. We brought everything they needed: food, clothing, tools, even some luxuries like French wine and Dutch ale. But 2,000 miles up the Missouri is a long way, no matter how profitable the cargo. Cargo we had, loaded to the gun, and passengers too, women and children among them. Some were fixing to make new homes up the river. Well, we were about 2 weeks out of St. Louis, dodging our way around rocks and roots and snags and snarling rapids, when we heard the river above us was even worse. The steamboat Deer Lodge, running 2 days ahead of us, had broken its paddle wheel, its rudder, and its hog chain, all in the same 5-mile stretch. But we kept right on. We figured that was their hard luck. Didn't have anything to do with us. Then our turn came. We hit a snag. On April 1st, 1865 at DeSoto Bend, we snagged and sunk. All the crew and passengers were saved, but the cargo was near a total loss, except what the salvors could pry loose. The rest was sucked into the muck forever. One brand new mountain steamer, 251 tons of iron, oak, pine, and rope, lost. Food, liquor, and patent medicine, bandanas, buckles, belts, and plastic powder, lost. Somehow we all picked ourselves up and went on. Some of the passengers made their way back to Omaha. Others just climbed on that steamer. That was the way we opened the West. The mountain steamers kept heading upriver, no matter how many moves the river claimed.
Thank you for watching my video. I do have more for you to view. Just press on the button. And if you'd like to subscribe to stay up to date, you can push that button too.